Imagine you're driving home late at night. Empty roads, your favorite song playing low, maybe a little too tired, but almost there. Then you see it. Flashing lights in your rearview mirror, your heart drops, your palms get sweaty, and within seconds, you're about to make a decision that could cost you thousands of dollars, add points to your license, spike your insurance rates for years, or in some cases, even land you in handcuffs. What if I told you that almost everyone makes the exact same mistake in this situation, and the police are counting on you to make it? Here's the part that nobody talks about. The mistake has nothing to do with whether you were speeding, rolling through a stop sign, or if your taillight was actually broken. The mistake happens before any of that even matters, and once you know what it is, you'll never look at a traffic stop the same way again. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand something that most drivers go their entire lives without realizing, and the answer might surprise you. Let me paint a clearer picture for you. Red and blue lights, sudden adrenaline, that immediate internal panic. What do? Most people start talking. They roll down the window, they reach for their wallet, they start explaining. "Officer, I know I was going a little fast, but I was just trying to get home. My wife is waiting. I swear I'm usually a safe driver." Stop right there. That impulse to explain, to justify, to be polite and cooperative and human, that is the number one mistake. And here's why it's so dangerous. Every single word you say before you've been asked a question is potential evidence against you. Not just about the stop, about everything. But let me back up for a second, because I need to tell you about a man named Michael. Michael was driving home from work on a Tuesday afternoon. Routine stop. An officer pulled him over for allegedly failing to signal a lane change. Michael didn't think he'd missed the signal, but he wasn't sure, so he did what most people do. He apologized. He said, "I'm really sorry, officer. I must have forgotten to hit the signal. Long day at work." That simple sentence, that human moment of politeness, turned a ticket that could have been dismissed in court into an admission of guilt. Michael paid $400. His insurance went up for 3 years. All because he said 4 words he didn't need to say. "I must have forgotten." Here's what almost nobody understands about traffic stops. They are not conversations. They are not social interactions. They are evidence-gathering encounters, and you are not required to help build the case against yourself. But your brain doesn't know that. Your brain sees an authority figure, feels the stress, and wants to de-escalate through cooperation and explanation. That evolutionary instinct, the one that kept your ancestors alive in tribal hierarchies, is exactly what works against you when those lights flash in your mirror. Think about that for a second. Your own psychology has been weaponized against you, and you didn't even know it. So what should you do instead? The answer is counterintuitive, and honestly, it might feel rude at first. You pull over safely. You turn on your interior light if it's dark. You keep your hands visible on the steering wheel. You wait. And then, when the officer asks if you know why they pulled you over, you do not answer that question. Not because you're being difficult, because you literally do not have to. Here's where it gets strange. In virtually every state in the US and throughout the UK, you are not legally required to admit to anything during a traffic stop. When an officer asks, "Do you know why I stopped you?" that question is not small talk. It is a direct invitation to incriminate yourself. If you say, "Was I speeding?" now you've acknowledged that speeding was possible. If you say, "I think my taillight might be out," you've just admitted to a equipment violation. If you say anything other than something neutral, you have just given the officer probable cause they might not have had. But the real twist is this. Most officers already know whether they're going to give you a ticket before they even get out of their car. Your conversation doesn't change the outcome 90% of the time. What it changes is what happens after. Whether the warning becomes a citation, whether the citation becomes a search, whether the search becomes an arrest. Every word you speak is a variable you're introducing into an equation that was already mostly solved before you opened your mouth. I want you to imagine something. Imagine you're an officer. You've pulled someone over for rolling through a stop sign. You approach the window. Before you can say anything, the driver says, "Good evening, officer. I'm going to keep my hands on the wheel here. Here's my license and registration. I know you're just doing your job." That's it. No excuses, no admissions, no nervous chatter. What's your impression? That driver is calm, respectful, and not giving you anything to work with. Compare that to the driver who immediately starts talking about how they're late for work, their kids are in the car, they've never gotten a ticket before, they're so sorry. Which one sounds more likely to get a warning? Actually, statistically, the calm one. Because the nervous talker just told you they're trying to manage your perception, which usually means they know they did something wrong. But here's the part that might make you uncomfortable. The number one mistake isn't just talking too much. It's also what people do with their hands. Let me take you to a body cam footage review from Arizona. A woman gets pulled over for a burned-out license plate light. Minor violation. The kind of thing most officers would turn into a warning. The officer approaches and asks for her license and registration. She reaches over to her glove compartment. Standard move, right? Most of us would do the same thing. But in that split second, the officer can't see her hands. He doesn't know if she's reaching for her registration or for something else. His adrenaline spikes. His hand moves to his weapon. The entire energy of the stop changes. Now he's on high alert. Now he's looking for danger everywhere. And when people are looking for danger, they find it. Or they invent it. That woman didn't get a warning. She got a ticket, a lecture, and a written warning to keep her hands visible at all times. But it could have been so much worse. There are countless examples of routine traffic stops escalating into something terrifying simply because the driver made sudden movements the officer couldn't see. Is that the driver's fault? Not entirely. But it is a reality you need to understand. Here's the correct way to handle this. Before the officer even reaches your window, have your license and registration ready. Not while they're walking up, while they're still in their car. As soon as you pull over, turn on your interior lights, get your documents, and place them on the dashboard or in your lap. Keep your hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. When the officer asks for your documents, tell them where they are. Officer, my wallet is in my right front pocket. My registration is on the dashboard. Then ask if you can reach for them. That simple question changes everything. It shows respect. It shows you understand their safety concerns. And it prevents that moment of sudden, unexplained movement that can turn a minor stop into a major incident. But there's a second hand-related mistake that almost nobody talks about, and this one is even more dangerous. You've seen this in body cam footage. You might have even done it yourself. The officer asks for your license. You hand it over. Then you immediately put both hands back on the wheel. That's good. But then the officer asks you a question. Maybe they ask where you're coming from. And you gesture. You point. You move your hands to explain something. Now your hands are off the wheel again, and the officer can't see them clearly. That is a pattern interrupt in the worst possible way. Every time your hands leave the visible zone, the officer's brain resets to a higher state of alert. The solution is almost painfully simple. Keep your hands on the steering wheel unless you are specifically and explicitly handing something to the officer. If you need to gesture, do it with your head. Nod, shake your head, use your words. Your hands stay still. This sounds paranoid until you realize that tens of thousands of traffic stops happen every single day in America alone, and the ones that go wrong almost always involve sudden, unexpected movement. But we haven't even gotten to the biggest mistake yet, the one that changes everything, and it has nothing to do with your hands. The number one mistake most people make at a traffic stop is answering the question, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" But the number zero mistake, the mistake that happens before that question is even asked, is assuming that the stop is about the reason the officer gives you. Let me explain what I mean. An officer can pull you over for any traffic violation, no matter how minor. A cracked windshield, a license plate light that's flickering, going 3 miles over the speed limit, driving too slowly, swerving within your lane. These are all legally sufficient reasons for a stop. But here's what the Supreme Court has made clear. Once you are stopped, the officer can look for other signs of criminal activity. The smell of alcohol or marijuana, nervous behavior, inconsistencies in your story, items in plain view. The initial reason for the stop is just the key that opens the door. What happens next depends entirely on what you say and do. So when an officer asks where you're coming from or where you're heading, they're not making small talk. They're looking for inconsistencies. They're building a timeline. They're gathering information that could justify extending the stop. And if they find something, that minor traffic stop can turn into a drug investigation, a DUI arrest, or worse. Here's a real example from Florida. A man gets pulled over for having an air freshener hanging from his rearview mirror. Illegal in Florida, believe it or not, because it's considered an obstruction, minor ticket. But the officer asks where he's coming from. The man says he's coming from a friend's house. The officer asks how long he was there. The man says a couple of hours. The officer notices the man's eyes are red and his speech is a little slow. Now the officer has reasonable suspicion to investigate for DUI. The man hadn't been drinking, he has allergies and he's tired. But because he answered those questions, the stop went from 2 minutes to 45 minutes. He passed every test. He was released with a warning. But he lost nearly an hour of his life because he felt obligated to answer questions he didn't have to answer. The correct response to, "Where are you coming from?" is not a lie. You should never lie to law enforcement. The correct response is, "Officer, with all due respect, I'd prefer not to answer that question." Or simply, "I'm not going to discuss that." You have a constitutional right to remain silent. That right applies during traffic stops. It applies before you're arrested. It applies the moment those lights come on. But most people don't know that. Or they know it in theory, but in practice, when an authority figure is standing at their window with a flashlight and a badge, their brain freezes and they start talking. That's not weakness, that's human nature. And the police know it. They're trained to use it. Let me tell you about something called the read technique. It's an interrogation method used by law enforcement across the US and the UK. One of its core principles is that guilty people act nervous and innocent people act calm. But here's the problem. That's not actually true. Innocent people get nervous around police all the time, especially people who've never been in trouble before. So when you're sitting there, hands shaking, voice trembling, explaining yourself too much, the officer's training tells them you're probably hiding something. You're not hiding anything, you're just scared. But their training doesn't distinguish between fear of getting a ticket and fear of getting caught. This is the cruel irony of traffic stops. The more you try to prove your innocence through conversation, the more guilty you look. The more you explain, the more they suspect. The more you talk, the more evidence you create. And once you've said something, you can never unsay it. Even if you were completely innocent of the original violation, your words can create new violations. Obstruction, lying to an officer, resisting without violence. These charges exist because of what people say, not what they do. Think about that. You could get pulled over for absolutely nothing, a mistake, a faulty taillight you didn't know about, and through conversation alone, you could talk your way into handcuffs. Meanwhile, someone who knows their rights says almost nothing, gets a warning, and drives away in 10 minutes. Who is smarter, the person who talks or the person who listens? So here's what you actually do. And I'm going to give you a script because scripts work when your brain is panicking. Pull over safely. Turn on your interior lights. Put your hands on the steering wheel. Wait. When the officer approaches, say this. "Good evening, officer. Here are my license and registration. I am going to keep my hands on the wheel." That's it. If they ask if you know why they pulled you over, say this. "I'm not sure, officer." Not a lie. You genuinely don't know what they observed. If they push and say, "You must have some idea," repeat, "I'm not sure, officer." If they ask where you're going or where you've been, "Officer, I'm going to exercise my right to remain silent." If they ask if they can search your vehicle, "I do not consent to any searches." These phrases feel uncomfortable to say. They feel confrontational. They feel like you're being difficult. But you're not being difficult. You're being smart. You're being safe. And you're protecting your rights in a situation where the other person has a gun, a badge, and the full weight of the legal system behind them. Here's the part most lawyers won't tell you. Even if you do everything right, you might still get a ticket. The officer might still be rude. You might still have a bad experience. But you will not make it worse. And in the long run, that is the only thing that matters. Traffic stops are not about justice. They are not about fairness. They are about procedure and evidence. The less evidence you provide, the fewer options the officer has. It's really that simple. Before we wrap this up, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had a traffic stop go wrong? Have you ever said something you immediately regretted? Or are you one of the rare people who already knew to keep your mouth shut? Drop your story in the comments. I read them, and I promise you, someone in this comment section needs to hear your experience. Here's the bottom line. The number one mistake everyone makes at a traffic stop is treating it like a normal conversation. It is not a normal conversation. It is a legal encounter with high stakes and very little upside for you. Every word you say can and will be used against you. That's not paranoia. That's the Fifth Amendment, plain and simple. Your silence is not an admission of guilt. Your silence is a constitutional right. And the only person who benefits from you forgetting that is the person standing at your window with a ticket book. So next time those lights flash in your mirror, remember Michael and his $400 apology. Remember the woman in Arizona who reached for her glove box. Remember the man in Florida who spent 45 minutes proving he wasn't drunk. And then remember this: you don't have to be rude. You don't have to be difficult. You just have to be quiet. Keep your hands visible. Keep your answers short. Keep your rights intact. And drive away knowing you didn't make the one mistake that everyone else makes. If this video saved you from a ticket or a worse outcome someday, do me a favor and hit that like button. Subscribe if you want to understand more about how the system actually works, and share this with someone you know who talks too much when they're nervous. They need to see this. Because the smartest thing you can say during a traffic stop is almost nothing at all. Stay safe out there.